Sorry, who does that? I do it or somebody else?
Yeah, you can do it if you
All right.
have the file. Yeah.
All right. Okay, how to love God? To love God in the most practical way is to love our fellow beings. If we feel for others in the same way as we feel for our own dear ones, we love God. If instead of seeing faults in others, we look within ourselves, we are loving God. If instead of robbing others to help ourselves, we rob ourselves to help others, we are loving God. If we suffer in the suffering of others and feel happy in the happiness of others, we are loving God. If instead of worrying over our own misfortunes, we think of ourselves more fortunate than many others, we are loving God. If we endure our lot with patience and contentment, accepting it as His will, we are loving God. If we understand and feel that the greatest act of devotion and worship to God is not to hurt or harm any of His beings, we are loving God. To love God as He ought to be loved, we must live for God and die for God, knowing that the goal of all life is to love God and to find Him as our own self. Jai Baba.
Jai Baba.
Jai Baba.
Jai Baba.
And just that's all. Just give me 1 second and I will join on.
Can I say something what I learned today before you
Sure.
start,
Yeah, sure.
Karthik?
Sure.
It seems when people have scheduled a meeting, let's say we're going to meet at 7:30, and Baba said to somebody, it seems that he would come and be present 5 minutes before. Have you heard that? I heard this for the first time. He told some people, Mandali people, that he would be present 5 minutes before. I thought that's very interesting.
Yeah.
Something to remember, something to follow. So Baba is with us now. So we have to feel that way.
Yes.
Absolutely.
So if we ever think about fighting with somebody, we should be careful not to yell at anybody, shout at anybody. Do we do that?
Well said.
When Baba is there? No.
Or finish it before the time. Jai Baba.
Jai Baba.
Jai Baba.
This is Kama. I have a question to Dr. Ravi. Why do you think that he's not present all the time? Why just 5 minutes before the meeting?
Why do I think? I don't think anything. This is I'm just a messenger. Don't kill me, okay? This is what I heard.
Yeah.
Baba is present all the time, but the fact that somebody tells I am there 5 minutes before, that makes me feel, oh, okay, I need to be there 5 minutes before. Baba will be there. It's like this, we have air everywhere, but sometimes we turn on the fan, in summer. Why is that? Right?
Yeah. Good one again.
Absolutely.
It's a little
Baba
bit.
is present everywhere. Baba is present. He's omnipresent.
So what you're saying is basically when we become self-aware, then he's always present. When we are not self-aware, he's not there. Just 5 minutes before the meeting.
Yeah. He's also given specific times, at 5 a.m. in the morning, I am present everywhere. So, I mean, Jai Baba.
No, I think Kama's point is also very valid. It's about self-awareness.
Yes.
That's a very good
correct.
point.
5 a.m. we are
Very good point.
self-aware.
That's correct.
I think we have to reach that. We have to reach to that point.
Yeah.
We
I
need
think
something like this 5 minutes before I am there. We need something like that.
Baba says time doesn't exist actually, but we are following a timetable, Still following the timetable.
It's a reminder that we forget Baba. So Baba is always there, but we tend to forget. So we need to get reminded now and then.
Okay, I'm having trouble, folks. My Adobe is saying it needs an install. Please wait a few minutes while the update is installed. So let me get another computer.
Or Kamaji can start reading before you
can you do
figure out.
that?
Kama, if you tell me the page number, I can try to project it.
Page number one.
I can tell you the page number. It's 160.
Okay, let me get there just in a minute.
Kamaji, I have never seen your face.
I'm yourself.
You give very good commentary. I love your commentary. So
It's Baba's gift. I love to be a stand-up comedian, so I'm thinking of starting something called spiritual comedy.
Good. Ravi, are you sure he exists?
I don't know. I'm not sure.
Yeah,
But, if I see
see?
the
See what I mean?
somehow, sometimes I feel you put a recorded thing, whenever you're done, what do you think, Kama? That is the time you turn on something, recorded.
Yes, we play many different roles.
Yeah.
Am I showing the book?
It's 181. Yeah, you're showing the book. Thank you. If you can just get 181, that will be
181. Nature of the ego and its termination.
Oh my goodness, very tough topic.
Yes. Can you just click on view? Can you just click on view and remove the
view?
Tools?
Oh yeah.
And then
view tools. And sorry, you told me something.
Yeah, tool. No. I think show hide, not tools.
Show hide.
Hide.
Show hide.
Tools. Remove tools. Yeah. Unclick on tools. Tools pane.
Click on tools pane. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Correct.
Yeah. And then I think the size is good. Or you want it bigger?
Depends. I can make it bigger. Yeah.
Yeah.
Is it okay?
So at the bottom, yeah, you can just make it 200 maybe.
200.
At the bottom. Yeah. Yeah. That's good. Thank you.
What's the page number?
It's 160 on the physical book.
Kama, all yours.
Get down to yeah, I can read as well. Kama, you
all
can
right.
read as
Okay.
well.
Yeah. Sure.
Kama, go ahead.
Yeah.
Okay. The nature of the ego and its termination. Part 1. The ego as the center of conflict. Subtitle: Origin of ego. In the pre-human stage, consciousness has experiences, but these experiences are not explicitly brought into relation with the central I. For example, a dog may get angry, but it does not continue to feel, I am angry. Even in this case, we find that the dog learns through some experiences and thus bases the action of one experience on another. But this action is a result of a semi-mechanical tension of connected imprints or sanskaras. It is different from the intelligent synthesis of experiences that the development of I consciousness makes possible. The first step in submitting the working of isolated impressions to intelligent regulation consists in bringing them all into relation with the center of consciousness, which appears as the explicit limited ego. The consolidation of ego consciousness is most clear and defined from the beginning of human consciousness. Subtitle: Formation of Ego. Human consciousness would be nothing more than a repository for the accumulated imprints of varied experiences if it did not also contain the principle of ego-centered integration, which expresses itself in the attempt to organize and understand experience. The process of understanding experience implies the capacity to hold different bits of experiences together as parts of a unity and the capacity to evaluate them by their being brought into mutual relationships. The integration of the opposites of experience is a condition of emancipating consciousness from the thraldom of diverse compulsions and repulsions which tend to dominate consciousness irrespective of valuation. The early attempts to secure such integration are made through the formation of the ego as its base and center. Subtitle: Ego arises to fulfill need. The ego emerges as an explicit and unfailing accompaniment to all the happenings of mental life in order to fulfill a certain need. The part played by the ego in human life may be compared to the function of ballast in a ship. The ballast in a ship keeps it from oscillating too much. Without it, the ship is likely to be too light and unsteady and is in danger of being overturned by the lawless winds and waves. Thus, mental energy would be caught up endlessly in the multitudinous mazes of dual experience and would all be wasted and dissipated if there were no provisional nucleus. The ego takes stock of all acquired experience and binds together the active tendencies born of the relatively independent and loose instincts inherited from animal consciousness. The formation of the ego serves the purpose of giving a certain amount of stability to conscious processes and also secures a working equilibrium which makes for a planned and organized life. Subtitle: Necessary Evil. It would be a mistake, therefore, to imagine that the arising of the ego is without any purpose. Though it arises only to vanish in the end, it does temporarily fulfill a need that could not have been ignored in the long journey of the soul. The ego is not meant to be a permanent handicap since it can be transcended and outgrown through spiritual endeavor. But the phase of ego formation must nevertheless be looked upon as a necessary evil which has to come into existence for the time being. Subtitle: Ego creates divisions and separation. The ego thus marks and fulfills a certain necessity in the future progress of consciousness. However, since the ego takes shelter in the false idea of being the body, it is a source of much illusion which vitiates experience. It is of the essence of the ego that it should feel separate from the rest of life by contrasting itself with other forms of life. Thus, though inwardly trying to complete and integrate individual experience, the ego also creates an artificial division between external and internal life in the very attempt to feel and secure its own existence. This division in the totality of life cannot but have its reverberations in the inner individual life over which the ego presides as a guiding genius. Jay Baba, I think if Karthik can go ahead because there's a lot of background noise and I don't want to, that is the voice sounding okay and
Yeah,
You're
pretty okay.
perfect. We are not hearing any of your
Yes,
any
we're
There's
not
background.
no
hearing
background
anything.
noise. Keep going. If you're okay, please keep going. Otherwise, I'll jump in.
okay. Subtitle: Ego becomes source of conflicts. While always striving to establish unity and integration in experience, the ego can never realize this objective. Though it establishes a certain kind of balance, this balance is only provisional and temporary. The incompleteness of its attainments is evident from the internal conflict that is never absent as long as experience is being faced from the point of view of the ego. From moment to moment, the mind of man is passing through a series of conflicts. The minds of great and distinguished persons, as well as the minds of common people, are seen to be harassed by conflicting desires and tendencies. Sometimes the conflict the mind is faced with is so acute that the person concerned yields to the pressures, and there is either a partial or total derangement of the mind. There is really no vital difference between the normal and the so called abnormal individual. Both have to face the same problems, but the one can more or less successfully solve his problems, and the other cannot solve them. Subtitle: False Valuation. The ego attempts to solve its inner conflicts through false valuations and wrong choices. It is characteristic of the ego that it takes all that is unimportant as important and all that is important as unimportant. Thus, although power, fame, wealth, ability, and other worldly attainments and accomplishments are really unimportant, the ego takes delight in these possessions and clings to them as mine. On the other hand, true spirituality is all important for the soul, but the ego looks upon it as unimportant. For example, if a person experiences some bodily or mental discomfort while doing work of spiritual importance, the ego steps in to secure the unimportant bodily or mental comfort, even at the cost of giving up the really important spiritual work. Bodily and mental comfort, as well as other worldly attainments and accomplishments, are often necessary, but they are not therefore important. There is a world of difference between necessity and importance. Many things come to the ego as being necessary, but they are not in themselves important. Spirituality, which comes to the ego as being unnecessary, is really important for the soul. The ego thus represents a deep and fundamental principle of ignorance, which is exhibited in always preferring the unimportant to the important. Subtitle: Conflicts solved through true valuation. The mind rarely functions harmoniously because it is mostly guided and governed by forces in the subconscious. Few persons take the trouble to attain mastery over these hidden forces that direct the course of mental life. The elimination of conflict is possible only through conscious control over the forces in the subconscious. This control can be permanently attained only through the repeated exercise of true valuation in all the cases of conflict presented to the mind. Subtitle: Need for intelligent and firm choices. If the mind is to be freed from conflict, it must always make the right choice and must unfailingly prefer the truly important to the unimportant. The choice has to be both intelligent and firm in all cases of conflict, important as well as unimportant. It has to be intelligent because only through the pursuit of true and permanent values is it possible to attain a poise that is not detrimental to the dynamic and creative flow of mental life. An unintelligent choice, if it is firm, may temporarily overcome conflict, but it is bound in the long run to curtail the scope of life or to hamper the fulfillment of the whole personality. Moreover, the conflict will surely reappear in some other form if it has not been intelligently solved. An intelligent solution, on the other hand, requires an insight into true values which have to be disentangled from false values. The problem of the conflict of desires thus turns out to be the problem of conflicting values, and the solution of mental conflict, therefore, requires a deep search for the real meaning of life. It is only through wisdom that the mind can be freed from conflict. Subtitle: Fidelity to Right Choice. Having once known what the right choice is, the next step is to stick to it firmly. Although the competing tendencies in the mind may be quieted by choosing one particular course in preference to other alternatives, they still continue to act as obstacles in making the choice fully effective and operative. At times, there is a danger of decision being subverted through the intensification of those competing forces in the subconscious. To avoid defeat, the mind must stick tenaciously to the right values it has perceived. Thus, the solution of mental conflict requires not only perception of right values, but also an unswerving fidelity to them. Subtitle: True values must govern all matters. An intelligent and firm choice, however, has to be repeatedly exercised in all matters, small or great. For the ordinary worries of life are not in any way less important than the serious problems with which the mind is confronted in times of crisis. The roots of mental conflict cannot completely disappear as long as there is only intermittent exercise of intelligent and firm choice. The life of true values can be spontaneous only when the mind has developed the unbroken habit of choosing the right values. Three-quarters of our life is made up of ordinary things, and though conflict concerning ordinary things may not cause much mental agony, it still leaves in the mind a sense of uneasiness that something is wrong. The conflicts that turn upon ordinary things are rarely even brought to the surface of consciousness. Instead, they cast a shadow on one's general feeling about life as if from behind a screen. Such conflicts have to be brought to the surface of consciousness and frankly faced before they can be adequately solved. Subtitle: Hidden Conflicts. The process of bringing conflict to the surface of consciousness should not degenerate, however, into a process of imagining conflict where there is none. The sure sign of a real hidden conflict is the sense that the whole of one's heart is not in the thought or action that happens to be dominant at the moment. There is a vague feeling of a narrowing down or a radical restriction of life. On such occasions, an attempt should be made to analyze one's mental state through deep introspection, for such analysis brings to light the hidden conflicts concerning the matter. Subtitle: Longing for ideal as motive power. When the conflicts are thus brought to light, it is possible to resolve them through intelligent and firm choices. The most important requirement for the satisfactory resolution of conflict is motive power or inspiration, which can only come from a burning longing for some comprehensive ideal. Analysis in itself may aid choice, but the choice will remain a barren and ineffective intellectual preference unless it is vitalized by zeal for some ideal appealing to the deepest and most significant strata of human personality. Modern psychology has done much to reveal the sources of conflict, but it has yet to discover methods of awakening inspiration or supplying the mind with something that makes life worth living. This indeed is the creative task facing the saviors of humanity. Subtitle: Disintegration of ego ends in realizing truth. The establishment of a true ideal is the beginning of right valuation. Right valuation, in turn, is the undoing of the constructions of the ego, which thrives on false valuation. Any action that expresses the true values of life contributes toward the disintegration of the ego, which is a product of ages of ignorant action. Life cannot be permanently imprisoned within the cage of the ego. It must at some time strive toward the truth. In the ripeness of evolution comes the momentous discovery that life cannot be understood and lived fully as long as it is made to move around the pivot of the ego. Man is then driven by the logic of his own experience to find the true center of experience and reorganize his life in the truth. This entails the wearing out of the ego and its replacement by truth consciousness. The disintegration of the ego culminates in realizing the truth. The false nucleus of consolidated sanskaras must disappear if there is to be a true integration and fulfillment of life. Jai Baba.
Jai Baba.
Jai Baba.
Thank you, Kama, thank you, Kama and Sunil, for jumping in and solving my technical problem. Very important chapter, and I think I didn't understand the bit about the true ideal. So if somebody can throw light on the true ideal, last but one para, that would be helpful.
I think Karthik, I would suggest that if you can read the last paragraph again and request that. Or...
Sure. Okay. Let me do it. Do you want me to do it? I can.
Yes, go ahead.
I'm back in business. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
Disintegration
Right.
of ego. Yeah. Disintegration of ego ends in realizing truth. The establishment of a true ideal. So, in fact, can I do something? Can I just read the previous paragraph as well? The true ideal.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Longing for ideal as motive power. So, when the conflicts are thus brought to light, it is possible to resolve them through intelligent and firm choices. The most important requirement for the satisfactory resolution of conflict is motive power or inspiration, which can only come from a burning longing for some comprehensive ideal. Analysis in itself may aid choice, but the choice will remain a barren and ineffective intellectual preference unless it is vitalized by zeal for some ideal appealing to the deepest and most significant strata of human personality. Modern psychology has done much to reveal the sources of conflict, but it has yet to discover methods of awakening inspiration or supplying the mind with something that makes life worth living. This indeed is the creative task facing the saviors of humanity. Disintegration of ego ends in realizing truth. The establishment of a true ideal is the beginning of right valuation. Right valuation, in turn, is the undoing of the constructions of the ego which thrives on false valuation. Any action that expresses the true values of life contributes towards the disintegration of the ego, which is a product of ages of ignorant action. Life cannot be permanently imprisoned within the cage of the ego. It must at some time strive toward the truth. In the ripeness of evolution comes the momentous discovery that life cannot be understood and lived fully as long as it is made to move around the pivot of the ego. Man is then driven by the logic of his own experience to find the true center of experience and reorganize his life in the truth. This entails the wearing out of the ego and its replacement by truth consciousness. The disintegration of the ego culminates in realizing the truth. The false nucleus of consolidated samskaras must disappear if there is to be a true integration and fulfillment of life. So I think it's just a higher motive. That's what I get out of true ideal, and which is basically the highest goal of setting our sights at the realizing the truth. Yeah, go ahead, Ravi.
Well, when you think is the ideal is only after maturity. You have to experience different states of lives, and let's say I was a singer at one life, and I liked in one life I was a singer, and I liked Lata Mangeshkar, and I'm so appreciative of Lata Mangeshkar. I always think about Lata Mangeshkar, and one day I want to reach that level. That is my ideal at one time. In another life, I may be great businessman and I want to be like Tata. That would be my ideal. After experiencing all these things, let's say we came into Baba's fold, and Baba is the one who tells us your ideal is to love Baba. So that would be our ideal. So in all these phases, we have to use our ego Ego is needed even to attain the God realization. And ultimately, the center of the pivot he was talking about, Baba is talking about, that will be culminated into that ultimate truth. But anyway, this chapter is not easy. It's very complicated, and what the struggle I have is the conflicts he's talking about. He talked a lot about conflicts. What is that conflict we are talking about here? Can anybody help me?
Before that question, I see Kama's, I will note that question, but Kama, you have put up your hand, so go ahead.
Jai Baba, I think that answering Karthik question, what I've understood about the ideal, excuse me, and what Ravi said, that we all have to take care of our material life. So I think the Maslow's hierarchy of self-actualization is a good reference point, because basically first we have to be practical in life, take care of the nitty-gritties of life. As Baba said in My Wish, ultimately we know we are human beings, but we behave like human becomings. And that becoming is only for the technical stuff, to have a career and put food on the table. But the reason for being born as a human being after going through all this evolution, reincarnation, is that God realization is the only purpose. But the paradox is we are already God realized, but not awakened because of sanskaras. So I believe that when we talk about conflicts, it varies between individual to individual based on their degrees of consciousness and their gross, subtle, and mental sanskaras. So when we are caught up in duality, pleasure and pain, happiness and suffering, that's a form of conflict to me. So in summary, basically Maslow's hierarchy self-actualization is the true ideal. But to reach that state, we have to go through all the different processes. And then, and we are only technically dealing with get over duality in the waking state. Because the 8 hours of sleep state, you're fine. So the question is, can we sleep for 10 hours or maybe 12 hours, 50% you're fine. The other 50% you just have to kind of, wade around, just play with life. Jai Baba.
I still didn't get the conflicts question, right? So I thanks for the true ideal, and I think the reread helped
Karthik,
me. I get that part.
Karthik,
Yeah, but
can you please go to the paragraph initially? Even the ordinary people and very evolved people also suffer with the conflict he was mentioning about. I may be wrong, but what I'm thinking is
it moral? It's not
what
moral.
I'm thinking is, correct me if I'm wrong, we are driven by our past sanskaras, but we have an ideal in front of us. I want to be like this, but I want to be perfect, let's say, in God Speaks. But I read God Speaks, but because of my whatever the flaws I have, I'm not able to get the full-fledged knowledge about God Speaks. So I have a conflict in my mind. Is that the conflict Baba is talking about here?
So I think the key lies in the term false value, right? So our conflict is between the false values and wrong choices, right? I'm still struggling to understand that, right? So is it?
So,
Jai Baba, can I just
I think,
try and respond
yeah.
to Ravi? Can I just respond to
go ahead,
Ravi on
Ranga.
conflict?
Yeah.
So I have done some work in the area of conflict as part of my training initiatives, and what I have understood is there is a history to how conflict theories evolved. But in the modern sense, there are 3 types of conflict. One is what we call as external conflict, which is to do with the environment, society, relationships, and power and influence. Then there is interpersonal, when we engage with other people. Okay, now you can apply this to the spiritual learning also. In the interpersonal, it's more about communication, behaviors, actions, and relationships. And there is also the internal conflict, which is a spiritual journey, which is more about our inner dialogue, thoughts, behaviors, and actions. So broadly, if you want a structured definition, these are the 3 aspects that I would like to talk about. So I don't know if this helps you a little bit more on understanding and putting some structure to conflict.
Yeah, go ahead, please. It looks like
Yeah.
it makes sense.
Yeah. So that's what I want to share, Jay Baba. Oh, one more thing. Kama spoke about the self-actualization piece. So there is a psychologist called Barrett who has done very interesting work on self-actualization. He just took that piece and he has been able to create what he calls as a values-based consciousness model. So he's been able to demonstrate that he has been able to link values and show how we progress on the values plane in terms of a personal consciousness and also in terms of a group setting. So he has got a tool, and in fact, more than me, you should ask Vidya because she's a certified on this particular thing. So I just thought I'd mention that, and it comes out very powerfully. So when you run that tool, it shows you which are your positive and negative values. And it is so if you do that exercise in the spiritual context, it will show you exactly where you're on the path. So I just thought I'd mention this, that it's an interesting instrument if you want a little bit of structure. Jay Babu.
Did I hear Sanjay wanting to say something?
I mean, I was just stuck on the burning longing for some comprehensive ideal. I think these ideals, to me, it appears is what Baba is saying as the universal truth. That's why Baba said that I have just come to awaken you to the reality. The truths like universal brotherhood, love, compassion, honesty, those ideals, and we always are in conflict because in the heart of heart we want to achieve that, but we are not able to achieve them. So that's the conflict all of us struggle with, that's what my understanding came to. Jai Baba.
Jay Baba, one more point I just want to share quickly from this and yesterday's reading. There is something called opposites of experiences. Like yesterday, we spoke about selflessness and selfishness. So I think that is a good way to understand the ego play. I think we can apply it to many other kinds of behavior, and maybe that's what creates a conflict within us. So that's a connect I saw from yesterday to today.
Yeah, perfect. Jai Baba.
Okay, so Kama, if you can quickly summarize, is that your hand back up again anyway? Okay, go ahead, Kama.
Yeah, Jai Baba. I think, when Ranga was talking about three types of, conflicts, I would call it probably two based on Baba, what he call as external renunciation and internal renunciation. I think it's described both in God Speaks and Discourses. So I don't have to go into the details. You can actually check it out. Because ultimately, the whole progress towards self-actualization is renunciation of desires, desirelessness, and so on and so forth. Coming back to your question on valuation, false valuation, conflicts, I think on page number 162, if you look at the subtitle false valuation, it's very clear there. The ego attempts to solve its inner conflicts through false valuations and wrong choices. It is characteristic of the ego that it takes all that is unimportant as important and all that is important as unimportant. When you extend the word ego, the thinking mind ego. And funny thing about the mind is it wants to make things permanent. I want to have a permanent job. I want to have a permanent figure. I want to have permanency. But that is going against the law of nature, because the most fundamental law is the universal law of nature is impermanence. Change is the only constant thing. But we are conditioned in our education ecosystem with our family and so on and so forth. How can we make things permanent? There is nothing permanent. Only existence probably is, because it's not changing. Everything else is changing. So I think the basic issue why we have conflicts is we have not understood the laws of nature, the laws of matter, material science, and the laws of spirit, spiritual science. And there is an interrelationship there. So India, being a repository of 5,000 years of going internally and finding out what is the purpose of life, has figured it out. But now the West is using the laws of matter, material science. They are almost there, but somehow they have not got it yet. So that's my point. If we really want to understand false valuation, what is the ideal and all that, I think it all is there in the laws of nature, and what God speaks is all about. Like I said, it's the gnosis, gnosis. It gives you mystical and divine knowledge. What is the whole purpose? So that's what we are doing right now. Jai Baba.
Okay. So with that, can we go to the next chapter?
Yes.
Silence is consent. Nature of ego. Yeah, nature of the ego and its termination. Part 2. Ego as an affirmation of separateness. Ego, a hindrance to spiritual emancipation, is the title. The ego is an affirmation of separateness. It takes many forms. It may take the form of a continued self-conscious memory expressing itself in recollections like, I did this and I did that. I felt this and I felt that. I thought this and I thought that. It also takes the form of ego-centered hopes for the future, expressing themselves through plans like, I shall do this and I shall do that. I shall feel this and I shall feel that. I shall think this and I shall think that. Or again, in the present, the ego manifests itself as a strong feeling of being someone in particular and asserts its distinctness and separateness from all other centers of consciousness, while provisionally serving a useful purpose as a center of consciousness. The ego, as an affirmation of separateness, constitutes the chief hindrance to spiritual emancipation and enlightenment of consciousness. The ego affirms its separateness through craving, hate, anger, fear, or jealousy. When a person craves the company of others, he is keenly conscious of being separate from them and thus feels his own separate existence intensely. The feeling of separation from others is most acute when there is great and unrelieved craving. In hate and anger, also, the other person is, so to speak, thrown out of one's own being and regarded not only as a foreigner, but as definitely hostile to the thriving of one's ego. This section is ego feeds upon exclusive feelings. Fear also is a subtle form of affirming separateness and exists where the consciousness of duality is unabated. Fear acts as a thick curtain between the I and the you, and it not only nourishes deep distrust of the other, but inevitably brings about a shrinking and withdrawal of consciousness so as to exclude the being of another from the context of one's own life. Therefore, not only other souls, but God should be loved and not feared. To fear God or his manifestation is to strengthen duality. To love God and his manifestations is to weaken it. Jealousy strengthens ego. The feeling of separateness finds most poignant expression in jealousy. There is a deep and imperative need in the human soul to love and identify itself with other souls. This is not fulfilled in any instance where there is craving or hate, anger or fear. In jealousy, in addition to the non-fulfillment of this deep and imperative need for identification with other persons, there is a belief that some other soul has successfully identified itself with the person whom one sought. This creates a standing and irreconcilable protest against both individuals for developing a relationship that one really wished to reserve for oneself. All exclusive feelings like craving, hate, fear, or jealousy bring about a narrowing down of life and contribute to the limitation and restriction of consciousness. They become directly instrumental in the affirmation of separateness of the ego. Slimming down of ego through love. Every thought, feeling, or action that springs from the idea of exclusive or separated existence binds. All experiences, small or great, and all aspirations, good or bad, create a load of impressions and nourish the sense of the I. The only experience that makes for the slimming down of the ego is the experience of love, and the only aspiration that makes for the alleviation of separateness is the longing to become one with the beloved. Craving, hatred, anger, fear, and jealousy are all exclusive attitudes that create a gulf between oneself and the rest of life. Love alone is an inclusive attitude which helps bridge this artificial and self-created gulf and tends to break through the separative barrier of false imagination. In true love, the lover also longs, but he longs for union with the beloved. When seeking or experiencing union with the beloved, the sense of the I becomes feeble. In love, the I does not think of self-preservation, just as the moth is unafraid of getting burned in the flame. The ego is the affirmation of being separate from the other, while love is the affirmation of being one with the other. Hence, the ego can be dissolved only through real love. Ego is made of desires. The ego is implemented by desires of varied types. Failure to fulfill desires is a failure of the ego. Success in attaining desired objects is a success of the ego. Through fulfilled desires as well as through unfulfilled ones, the ego is accentuated. The ego can even feed upon a comparative lull in the surging of desires and assert its separative tendency through feeling that it is desireless. When there is a real cessation of all desires, however, there is a cessation of the desire to assert separativeness in any form. Therefore, real freedom from all desires brings about the end of the ego. The ego is made of variegated desires, and the destroying of these desires amounts to the destruction of the ego. Roots of ego in subconscious mind. The problem of erasing the ego from consciousness is very complicated. However, because the roots of the ego are all in the subconscious mind in the form of latent tendencies, and these latent tendencies are not always accessible to explicit consciousness. The limited ego of explicit consciousness is only a small fragment of the total ego. The ego is like an iceberg floating in the sea. About 1/7 of the iceberg remains above the surface of the water and is visible to the onlooker, but the major portion remains submerged and invisible. In the same way, only a small portion of the real ego becomes manifest in consciousness in the form of an explicit I, and the major portion of the real ego remains submerged in the dark and inarticulate sanctuaries of the subconscious mind. Ego heterogeneous in constitution. The explicit ego, which finds its manifestation in consciousness, is by no means a harmonious whole. It can and does become an arena for multitudinous conflicts between opposing tendencies. It has a limited capacity, however, for allowing simultaneous emergence of conflicting tendencies. Two persons have to be at least on speaking terms if they are to enter into articulate wrangling. If they are not on speaking terms, they cannot bring themselves to quarrel on common ground. In the same manner, two tendencies that can enter into conscious conflict must have some common ground. If they are too disparate, they cannot find admittance into the arena of consciousness, even as conflicting tendencies, but have to remain submerged in the subconscious mind until they are both modified through the tension exerted by the diverse activities connected with the conscious mind. Explicit ego and implicit ego. Although the entire ego is essentially heterogeneous in its constitution, the explicit ego of consciousness is less heterogeneous than the implicit ego of the subconscious mind. The explicit ego operates as a formidable whole compared with the isolated subconscious tendencies that seek to emerge in consciousness. The organized ego of explicit consciousness thus becomes a repressive barrier that indefinitely prevents several constituents of the implicit ego from access to consciousness. All the problems of the ego can be tackled only through intelligent and conscious action. Therefore, complete annihilation of the ego is possible only when all the constituents of the ego pass through the fire of intelligent consciousness. Intensified conflict ends in attaining poise and harmony. The action of intelligent consciousness on the components of the explicit ego is important, but in itself it is not sufficient for the desired results. The components of the implicit ego of the subconscious mind have to be brought to the surface of consciousness somehow and become parts of the explicit ego, and then be submitted to the action of intelligent consciousness. If this is to be achieved, there has to be a weakening of the explicit ego in such a manner as to allow the emergence into consciousness of those desires and tendencies that could not hitherto find admittance into the arena of consciousness. This release of inhibited tendencies naturally brings about additional confusion and conflict in the explicit ego. Therefore, the disappearance of the ego is often accompanied by intensified conflicts in the arena of the conscious mind rather than by any comfortable easing of them. However, at the end of the uncompromising and acute struggle lies the state of true poise and unassailable harmony that comes after the melting away of the entire iceberg of the ego. Ego lives through opposites of experience. The digging out of the buried roots of the ego from the deeper layers of the subconscious and bringing them to the light of consciousness is one important part of the process of wiping out the ego. The other important part consists in the intelligent handling of desires after they gain entrance to the arena of consciousness. The process of dealing with the components of explicit consciousness is by no means clear and simple, for the explicit ego has a tendency to live through any one of the opposites of experience. If it is ousted from one opposite by the intensive operation of intelligent consciousness, it has a tendency to move to the other extreme and live through it. Through repeated alternation between the opposites of experience, the ego eludes the attack of intelligent consciousness and seeks to perpetuate itself. Ego is hydra-headed. The ego is hydra-headed and expresses itself in numberless ways. It lives upon any type of ignorance. Pride is the specific feeling through which egoism manifests. A person can be proud of the most unimportant and silly things. Instances are known, for example, of people developing their nails to an abnormal length and preserving them despite such much inconvenience to themselves for no other reason than to assert separateness from others. The ego must magnify its attainments in grotesque ways if it is to live in them. Direct assertion of the ego through self-display in society is very common. But if such direct assertion is prohibited by the rules of conduct, the ego has a tendency to seek the same result through the slander of others. To portray others as evil is to glorify oneself by suggesting a comparison. A comparison the ego would willingly develop, though it often restrains itself from doing so. Tricks of ego. The ego is activated by the principle of self-perpetuation and has a tendency to live and grow by any and all means not close to it. If the ego faces curtailment in one direction, it seeks compensating expansion in another. If it is overpowered by a flood of spiritual notions and actions, it even tends to fasten upon this very force, which was originally brought into play for the ousting of the ego. If a person attempts to cultivate humility in order to relieve himself of the monstrous weight of the ego and succeeds in doing so, the ego can, with surprising alacrity, transfer itself to this attribute of humility. It feeds itself through repeated assertions like, "I am spiritual." Just as in the primary stages, it achieved the same task by assertions like, I am not interested in spirituality. Thus arises what might be called a spiritual ego, or an ego that feels its separateness through the attainment of things considered to be good and highly spiritual. From the truly spiritual point of view, this type of ego is as binding as the primary and crude ego, which makes no such pretensions. Guerrilla warfare. In fact, in more advanced stages of the path, the ego does not seek to maintain itself through open methods, but takes shelter in those very things that are pursued for the slimming down of the ego. These tactics of the ego are very much like guerrilla warfare and are the most difficult to counteract. The ousting of the ego from consciousness is necessarily an intricate process and cannot be achieved by exercising a constantly uniform approach. Since the nature of the ego is very complicated, an equally complicated treatment is needed to get rid of it. As the ego has almost infinite possibilities for making its existence secure and creating self-delusion, the aspirant finds it impossible to cope with the endless cropping up of the fresh forms of the ego. He can hope to deal successfully with the deceptive tricks of the ego only through the help and grace of a perfect master. Master as last resort. In most cases, it is only when the aspirant is driven to realize the futility of all his efforts that he approaches a master. By himself, he can make no headway toward the goal that he dimly sights and seeks. The stubborn persistence of the ego exasperates him, and in this clear perception of helplessness, he surrenders to the master as his last and only resort. The self-surrender attempt amounts to an open admission that the aspirant now has given up all hope of tackling the problems of the ego by himself, and that he relies solely upon the master. It is like saying, I am unable to end the wretched existence of this ego. I therefore look to you to intervene and slay it. This step, however, turns out to be more fruitful than all the other measures that might have been tried for the slimming down and subsequent annihilation of the ego. When through the grace of the master, the ignorance that constitutes the ego is dispelled, there is the dawn of truth, which is the growth of all creation. So, I have a question for the group. Is there any example that you can think of guerrilla warfare that the ego employs? That's an interesting thought that it resurfaces in different ways. So I'm trying to think of an example, right? So anybody can think of an example. So I suppress it in one form and then it springs up in another.
Yeah, frankly, I have seen over last many years being in Mehrabad and others, I mean, the very close Baba lovers falling into a fight with others, you know, and purely from point of view of ego. So that happens to all of them, even if people have been close to Baba for 50 years or so, you know, those kinds of things. That's one example which comes to my mind. I can't, of course, name. Yeah, Jai Baba.
Sure.
I think there are many more, and I think all of us encounter these examples. I gave a small lecture on spirituality to my office other day, and I'm thinking, was it my ego? I mean, we are nowhere yet. So from one end of not being spiritual to start lecturing others on spirituality, maybe too early for us. I'm not sure.
I don't think it's wrong. It depends on what you said there, right? So if you're saying if you're saying that, hey, I've discovered something and I need need all of you to think like that. I think that's still
Karthik, there's a
good.
very fine dividing line. I was thinking about that too. What did I say there? While I was reading this, I was asking myself, what did I say? You're right.
Yeah.
But we have to be careful. Thanks.
If I may add, can I say something? Can you all hear me?
Yeah.
I think Sunil and others, it's the intent, the motive behind it. If it's, basically sharing some principles of spirituality with the intent of, just sharing, I think that's a great objective, Sunil.
Ashok, Baba didn't use in his book terms like guerrilla warfare and very intricate process. So ego is very, very tricky stuff. So we have to be careful all the time.
Yes.
Yeah, because even in intent, one may rationalize themselves to say this is good intent, but actually it is an expression of ego. I have two hands up. I didn't see the order in which they went up, but I'll go with Kama and then Nomita. Kama?
Jai Baba. I think I'll give you a perfect example of guerrilla warfare, which is with myself. When I was doing spiritual shopping, I was doing Ramakrishna, Ramana Maharishi, blah, blah, blah. Then I was doing physics. I was trying to figure out for myself how this whole thing works. I was definitely attracted to all the different schools of thought. Then when I was in US, I kind of got fed up, that I'm not able to kind of figure it out, because on one side, my ego is also working overtime, that you can do it yourself. So I kind of decided that, after some time, that I can crack it. I am smart and intelligent. I have a good analytical mind. So I'll go through all these different schools of thought and create my own operating system, anyway. So, and I can tell you that I failed, and I finally had to surrender to the fact that you need the guidance of a perfect master. And I think it also happened when I was going through the phase of intellectually connecting to Baba from 97. And in 2009, when he turned the key and I was able to have full conviction, because ultimately it is the perfect master or the avatar who's going to decide when you're ready. The only thing we can do is make the effort. So I am a victim of somebody who played guerrilla warfare. Sometimes I would say I love Baba. Sometimes I would say, I don't need him. I can do it myself. I can crack it. So this is an example of, guerrilla warfare that I can think about. Another question I would like to ask the audience is that there is a line which says in page number 168, first paragraph, the last line, hence the ego can be dissolved only through real love. Now, if each one of you, if you could tell me how do you interpret this statement? Hence the ego can be dissolved only through real love, whenever you feel like. Jai Baba.
Okay, just to react to your guerrilla warfare example, the way I looked at your example is, it's real ego, right? It's very out in the open ego, right? I say, hey, I'll do it myself. So I'm more interested in the fact where I think I've beaten it in one place and it just springs up in another or whatever when Baba is using that powerful term guerrilla warfare. But we'll keep reflecting to maybe identify such an example. But I think your question is interesting, and let's reflect. Nomita, meanwhile, had her hand up, so she's put it down.
Hi, Jai Baba.
Yeah, did you have something to say? Yeah.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
So now that we know this ego thing, so what do we need to do to kind of get going and let go of it? What are the 3 steps we must take? I mean, we have the perfect master with us. Baba is there. So are we in good hands? Are we progressing? Or what is the action item to overcome this negativity in us?
I think that's precisely Kama's comment. Hence, the ego can be dissolved only through real love. So he's asking, what is real love?
Okay, real
Yes,
love.
I think the practical part is self-awareness. You have to become self-aware of each and every act. Just focusing in Baba is just a kind of a process. It is a semantic term. But I truly believe that, here I'm sitting in my village in the, cow shed, and for me, this is like, you have to be aware every moment. That is real love, in being. So that is a practical approach that I try to follow, but it will be different for different people depending on what you're working on, Jai Baba. And how to love God and my wish, all those things actually helps you how to dissolve the ego through real love, because those are there, the messages. Jai Baba.
Jai Baba, thank you.
I thought so as well. Yeah.
Yeah.
How to love God, 7 realities, all this. If we can do it, ego will disintegrate by itself.
Jai Baba.
Yeah, go ahead.
Jai Baba.
I have Ravi. Yeah, Namita, go ahead.
I want to ask, can you plant love or you fall in love naturally?
One can cultivate love, but love to become spontaneous is the grace and blessings of the
Gift
perfect.
of Amma.
Jai Baba, thank you.
Yeah, Ravi, go ahead.
Love, there's only thing we have to do. How to love is number 2 things we have to do. One is how to love and how to love Baba. Those are the 2 things. We don't need to worry about reading God speaks, understand God speaks, all those things. Spend all your time how to love God. And Baba said, if you do not know how to love God, watch others and learn from them. If we learn to love, as we progress in our love, we will understand what the problems of ego are. And then how do you love? It is you who have, what do you use to love God, to learn to love God? It is the ego again. So ego is a necessity thing that we have to use. That is the only tool we have that we have to use to control the ego and to learn the love. It is like if you're walking on a barefoot outside and a thorn, you're hit with a thorn, and how do you take it out? You have to use another thorn to take it out. So it is your own ego you have to learn. That's one point I want to say. And the second point I want to say is, Karthik, you're asking about guerrilla warfare. What is a guerrilla warfare? It is not like a regular war. There are certain norms and all those things. Guerrilla warfare is going out of the way. Few people go and ambush certain people and then hide, and then all these different not a regular way of doing the war. Ego is like that. Ego also, there is no certain trend it follows. It follows all different ways. It's very tricky. It's multi-hydrated, and it comes out even if you close with your hands closely. It can come out of these little spaces we have in the hands. It's that tricky. It is with the same ego we have to, same I consciousness, we have to control that ego so that we can learn to love Baba, and that's how we progress. And yeah, that's what I want to say.
Sure. I take the last question from Mama. He had his hand up. So yeah, go ahead.
This has been a very serious intellectual discussion. I am unable to absorb all the things there. So in this background, what I feel is, say, there are so many devotees of Baba who will not be able to do all this intellectual jugglery and read God speaks or discourses and say threadbare evaluate what is love and make it so dry that love loses its the attraction itself. So there should be a way out. So you love Baba, forget about everything. That should be one of the ways of progressing in the path. That's how I feel.
Jai Baba, Vidya here today.
Yes.
Oh, hi Vidya. How are you?
Can I?
Jai
Sure,
Baba
go ahead.
Vidya.
Jai Baba Vidya Garu. Oh,
Jai
please.
Baba Andy. Then I thought I heard from Kama that you're going to do last 2 days of reading, and I wanted to be part of the group at least for the last 2 days. And interestingly, it came out the session. So I'm really happy that, and I've been really enjoying the session ever since I logged in this morning. I thought I should share my experiences, and I thought maybe something would be useful to other people. And I also want to learn from other people. It was beautiful listening to all of that. And Doc Mama said it very beautifully that, so much of literature and intellectualization of all the ego part and the love and the discourses, God speaks and all, it makes Baba, who's so simple, saying that love me simply, and then with all this intellectualization, it becomes so difficult to love Baba at times. So a few steps that I could share with you on the ego part. I think if you remember my about how Baba worked with me on the ego part, I shared my story how he worked at Merabat on Silence Day and what he did to me for dissolving the ego, at least at the beginning of ego. And there's also a chapter on the reality of ego in dawn of reality. So maybe that is also driven from my experience and all that Baba shared. So maybe that could also help to understand a little bit more. To my mind, I think what Sanjay said that, people are talking and fighting, Baba lovers are fighting and all that and all this stuff. Being all the reality, what is important in the ego part of it, the steps is one, to look at ourselves first. So when I deal with ego, I look at my ego, what is going on in me. And guerrilla war, when both the sides of ego is put up, the plus and the minus side comes. Like if you say, I should do this, the mind would say, no, don't do this. This is not working. And this is ego. The ego would again come back another version saying, no, this is what I mean. This is not what I mean. So there will be lots of ifs and buts that happen inside. And the overall check on whether it is coming from ego or it is coming from real self. If you are naturally in a way and you have a space of not from a space of selfishness, hatred, jealousy, all that, but you have a base that I'm coming from the space of love and I need to give this at this point of, that means at least there's some clarity that you are.
Vidya, your audio cut off, Vidya.
Some tools for the next in a given set of playing games. Sorry?
Yeah, it's okay.
Hello?
It's back now. It's back now. Keep going.
Yeah. So Baba has this habit of making people fight and demonstrate how ego of different people are working. So we have to be conscious of Baba's games, but these are divine games. But at the same time, there are divine games, or there are some are human-made games. So we should be able to differentiate which are divine games and which are human games, mind games. So this is one more tool that we should have to differentiate what is Baba doing, what are we doing. The third thing is ultimately when the love is given by the master, the love is very clear in our mind and we know we are loving Baba and Baba loves us and he is giving experiences to all the lovers without any discrimination. Everyone is having their quota of experiences from Baba. So there's no dearth of love in Baba's world. So everyone goes through. And then from that love, ultimately, I have experienced that when you surrender to Baba, saying, Baba, I can't handle this ego. This is coming in different forms, in different ways. And I'm just not able to handle it. I surrender to you completely. and the intellectualization on ego does not work. It is my confirmation. My experiences, intellectualization of ego does not work. One has to be spontaneous. We have to live a life, and we have to do everything we are doing in the moment. We can't escape that. And from those experiences, we have learnings. From those learnings, we process those learnings and go to the next level. This is the process of learning. At the same time, when we go to Baba and say, I can't do this, and at the right time, that, like it is said, master comes and he takes away, in a movement, the ego is removed from your system, fat, and it is over. Like your ego is gone, you are still functional, but you are functional from probably an impersonal ego. You are there for doing your jobs and duties and doing other things. You fulfill all of those. And when you operate in this world, there is an I-ness without which you can't perform. So that I-ness comes, but with a sense of impersonal thing, like, I'm doing it, just doing it. But maybe I would be happy, I would be joyful, I would be sad, I would be angry, but I'm at the background, there is consciousness, I am all this. And very nicely said about humility and all that stuff. That should not be also imposed humility and something like I be humble, and masks. All these would also say that, okay, I am humble. Look, I am humble, and this is the way I should behave. That is also a kind of ego, according to me. So one has to be natural. The intent is important. The base of love is important. And more importantly, Baba's grace in removing ego, the day you know that it is removed, I think it is done. Jai Baba. Thank you so much for giving me this time.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And I think we are badly out of time, but we are not taking time away from our next guest, or not guest, member, who's going to get her full time for the interaction. So I'll just quickly
yeah. This is Kama here. One quick comment on what Vidya and Ravi were talking and what Dr. Mama was saying. What Vidya said is perfect in the sense I mentioned my own spiritual shopping, and I had to admit to the fact and surrender that I had failed. And once that happened, and you do it with complete surrender and you admit it without any ego, then the key got turned. So again, cultivation is by using the analytical reasoning mind, but spontaneity comes through intuition and the grace of the master. This is my personal experience. Number two, talking about Doc Mama saying that all this intellectualization, blah, 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 I can understand that because I went through the same process. And I think I'm again quoting Ramana Maharshi. He said there are two ways. One is Jnana Yoga and Bhakti Yoga. You completely surrender, and whatever is thrown at you, accept it as Baba's prasad, suffering and happiness. Okay. That is pure bhakti without going through all this intellectual knowledge, all that stuff. The other way is also to use intellectual understanding, Advaita, Vedanta, whatever, which is where I think God speaks, discourses are helpful. So I just wanted to make a comment on what Dr. Ravi said. The two things that he said, one is to watch people. This is my opinion. That's the most dangerous statement I've heard, because I don't want to watch others because my mind will get, because I've been impressed by a lot of people and they've fallen off the pedestal. So I've realized I'm only going to talk to Baba like straight, like, whatever messages is given, can I follow that or not? And number two is discourses and God speaks. Yes, we need that for critical discrimination for people like me. I don't have the love of what Vidya has because she has the grace. My thing is I have to go through this process, follow through the book and see when it happens. So I think intellectual knowledge is a scaffolding. It is not the end result, because ultimately you have to drop it off. Knowledge doesn't matter. It's only love that matters. That was my point. Jai Baba.
Kamaji,
very good summary.
Kamaji, you have to first of all, you have to listen. Number one. Number two, what I said was, Baba said, if you want to learn from others how to love God, how to love. That's what I mentioned. I did not say watch others and follow others, just for clarification.
Okay.
Okay. So with that, we'll just jump to the next portion where Charandeep is going to talk to the group and talk about her experiences. So Charandeep, you there?
Yes, Karthik, I'm there.
Yeah, so you can actually...
Good morning, Jai Baba, everyone.
So you
Good
can...
morning, Jai Baba.
Jai Baba. Kama, you're formless for me. I've seen all, but I think I haven't seen you, so you have no form.
One second. Yeah. Kama?
Jai Baba, sorry, I was off on. Sorry, what was? I couldn't hear it. What was it?
Should
I repeat
it seems you are formless.